Welcome everybody to my talk on maturing your platform engineering initiative. So my name is Nicki Watt and I'm the CEO and CTO of OpenCredo, hands-on software development consultancy based here in London and focused on helping our customers build great data and cloud-based platforms. Now we've worked with a variety of different organizations to help them mature their various platform engineering initiatives. And this ranges from working in sort of core banking to automotive industry, life sciences, and various others. So this talk is going to be drawing on some of these experiences to help give you some insight into what this looks like and hopefully provide you with some practical ideas and ways for you to think about this on your journey. Now, agenda-wise, a lot of what I'm going to be speaking about is on how the platform engineering maturity model can help you on this journey. So first up, we're going to cover what this actually is. Then we'll dive into the meat of the talk and explore typical journeys and challenges that we see as we help our customers along the way before we finish off with some key lessons, takeaways, and conclusion. So let's start off with the intro and the maturity model. Where did it actually come from? So originally this was donated to the CNCF by the lovely people at Centessa, and in November 2023, the official version 1 was released. OpenCredo was involved in contributing to the initial pre-release version of the model, which was based on how we tend to incorporate the sort of thinking with our customers. So I'm going to give you our take on how we see this framework working and how it feeds into these journeys. So there is a URL for you to follow here to the official model, and I do also encourage you to go and have a look at that yourself. But what is this model? At its heart, it's really a collation of patterns and wisdom which has been gathered by many people and put together in this nice handy matrix-style framework. And the goal is really to try and describe the different characteristics and the practices which exist at different stages of platform maturity. It tries to provide you with enough information so that you can work out where you fit in, but also highlight what some of the limitations may be for the level that you're at, so that you can understand what the opportunities are for improvement. Now, that's not meant to be dogmatic. Some bits are going to apply more than others, and it's up to you to use what helps and discard the rest. At its highest level, however, there are two angles to it. The first is the different aspects you need to consider, and the second is the maturity level. So looking at the different aspects, the first one which we have a look at is generally around investment. This tries to have a look at what is the process for actually allocating staff and funds to build the platform capabilities. This may be done organically from the grassroots or driven from top-down initiatives. But whatever it looks like, this aspect is really key because it can unlock opportunities in other aspects and help you to optimize for ensuring that you get the right people and money at the right time and at the right places. Secondly, we have adoption. And this is where we look at how and why users discover and use the internal platforms and their capabilities. Now, this is not only about how much an organization actually uses capability-wise, but also what motivates users to do that. So we want platforms that are really desirable, that people will value and that they want to use. But this can range from one end where people may not even know they have a platform, maybe it's just a loose collection of capabilities, versus the other end of the spectrum where you have a far more curated experience. On the one end, you may have users who are forced onto the platform because it's mandated, and on the other end, you may have users who absolutely love it and are trying to promote it, and a whole variety of maturity levels in between that. Interfaces is really about looking at how do users interact with and consume your platform capabilities. And this includes around activities such as provisioning, managing, and observing the platform. Initially, you may find that there's a lot more manual ticketing-based systems in the beginning, and then as you mature, you tend to encounter more automation, APIs, things like command line tools. Operations is the penultimate official aspect that we look at, and this is really around how platforms and their capabilities are planned, prioritized, developed, and maintained. Now, as the saying goes, a dog is for Christmas and not just for life. And so it's the same when it comes to your platform operations. You really do need to consider not just your day one capabilities, but also day two and the whole life cycle around that in order to make sure that you've got a well-structured and mature initiative. And this will include looking at things like how do you do upgrades, how do you bring in new and improved features, and how do you do operational support. Finally, we then have measurement, which is the process of how we go about gathering and incorporating feedback and learning for the platform. So how will you know if you're maturing if you don't have some kind of benchmarks to measure against? And this aspect has a look at what are the explicit but also implicit feedback that comes from users. And mature organizations are generally able to measure this and know whether they're improving in terms of user satisfaction. So we look at things like feedback mechanisms themselves, but also the quality and the consistency of the feedback that comes from that. So those were the aspects. Then you also have maturity levels, and these are generally labeled 1 to 4, and they come with some descriptive titles. But the key thing to note here is that there is no single standalone definition for each level. It generally needs to be looked at in the context of the aspect being considered. And this will generally range from more tactical ones on the left to more strategic ones on the right. And that's not to say that if you're at level 1, it's bad. It just means that maybe you're there for some tactical reasons, and you need to sort of, you can progress to others as need be as you go along. But when you put all these things together, you get this nice matrix style setup. And I'm not going to be going through all of this, but I do encourage you to have a look at it and understand what the different levels and the setups mean in their context. What is worth noting, though, is that as you aim for higher levels of maturity, there is a requirement for more funding and people's time. And what this means in reality is that you don't need to worry that you always must aim for level 4. You really want to aim for a level which fits the constraints that your organization has in terms of how much you can invest in time and money, and that will actually kind of benefit you. So let's recap. What is the point of this maturity model? Is it to try and get some kind of comparative score, like I'm a 3.5 out of 5 compared to Joe Blogs? Absolutely not. Is it meant to help you find the one true way to mature your platform engineering initiative? Definitely not. There are many different ways to do this. What it is trying to do is to give you a helpful way to understand what are some of the outcomes and the practices that exist at different levels of maturity, help you to figure out where you currently are in your platform journey, what the limitations exist, and therefore what are the opportunities that you can use to improve them. And finally, it also tries to cement the idea that these outcomes can only really be achieved when you try and balance the people, process, and policy alongside technology. So great, we have defined and explored the platform maturity model. Now I want to have a look at some typical scenarios and the journeys that we often see clients go on when they embark on these journeys, and see what we can learn from that. Now, there could be many reasons why people look to build and improve their platform engineering initiatives. I'll list some of them here, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but they tend to vary based on the context and the particular challenges that you find yourself in at any given point in time. But I would say that irrespective of the scenario, there are generally a few common steps which everyone tends to take when they try and work out what this journey looks like for them. And the first one involves, before you even get starting, to understand you want to know what your ultimate goals are and what are the constraints that you're working within. And this will generally involve trying to work out things like, what are your main drivers for the platform? And there could be multiple of these, but you want to be explicit. So for example, are you trying to scale the organization to a particular size in a particular time? Or maybe you're trying to migrate to some legacy technologies. And these questions are important because it dictates where you want to get to, and therefore also what the options and the strategies are that you may need to employ as you go forward. Now, once you've established what you're aiming for and why, you then need to work out and try and plot where you currently are. And so you want to know your landscape. So you can work out, given your context, where is it best to improve. And you basically try to plot where you are in the different aspects. And remember, it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. And you often find that you might be on level 1 for some things and level 3 for others. And that's absolutely fine. It's to be expected. But once you figure out where you are, where you're going, you then want to say, okay, I know where I'm starting from, and oops, sorry about that. I know where I'm starting on, I know where I'm going to, and now I need to take sort of baby steps and iterate in terms of getting there. So this generally involves, as I say, iterating, learning, rinsing, repeating. And this is especially so in the beginning parts of the process because it can be quite experimental. So you want to make sure you give yourself time to learn and adapt. Okay, so we have our common steps. Let's look at a scenario. So one which comes up quite often for us with our customers is that there's a desire to do technology better. So here people will say, actually, I want to improve my Kubernetes platform. But I would say that, and I've said this in many of my other talks before, that this is not really a valid business reason in and of itself. You generally need to dig deeper to find this and ask questions like, what are the important things you're trying to achieve as a business? What is the driver behind it? Then you often encounter or uncover the other reasons. For example, people may say, okay, I'm trying to grow and I need to scale. Maybe I need to deliver faster and more effectively, or some combination of that. And so to make this talk a little bit more sort of concrete, we're going to explore and dive into this particular scenario. Now, this could happen for a startup or an enterprise, but for the purposes of this talk, we're going to focus on just looking at what it means for an enterprise. So in these cases, they tend to have, some kind of center of excellence type setup, which means you've got a central team of sorts and you're ready to go. So, as I said earlier, the first thing we want to do is establish what our ultimate goals are and the constraints that we are working within. So let's say in this case, our enterprise is just committed to doing some key business expansion. Maybe they've done some kind of M&A and now they need to scale and support 20 plus teams and maybe even go beyond that as they go forward. And they're probably aiming to do this in sort of 12 to 18 months. So target-wise, they're mostly aligned with trying to get to sort of level 4. So let's understand what our landscape is. Where are we starting from? Now, at this point, we would take the platform maturity model and have a look at the various descriptions and the characteristics that it has and some of the example scenarios and try and see where we fit best. So if we look at this in the investment side, we try and sort of mark ourselves. And typically what we see is that for an enterprise center of excellence setup, they'll often land up in around about level 2. And this is the fact that they have central funding, likely have a dedicated team, but quite often in this case, it's mostly technology folk in the team, and it's often treated as a cost center. So, okay, that was investment. What about adoption? So from this perspective, and this is a bit of a generalization, you'll often find that also fall into around about level 2. And this is because the platform is often mandated for enterprise users. There's generally some kind of edict or internal directive which compels developers to use certain frameworks. So it's not that they're self-selecting, it's because they've been told that they need to use it. Interface-wise, this can be a little bit of a mixed bag, but we often see enterprises somewhere between level 1 and 2. And here they have sort of semi-consistent interfaces, definitely have good ones for often onboarding and bootstrapping, probably documentation and templates for getting started. But if you try and then kind of deviate off the common path or do something a little bit different, then there isn't really good options here and you're generally kind of left to your own devices. Operation-wise, this is where we tend to see the least defined or well-defined area. And noting, of course, that some organizations can be further along the track, but one of the common characteristics we find here is that there is a big focus on the day 1 and less of the day 2 activities. So when things need to be done here, they're often done reactively rather than proactively. So for example, let's say there's a vulnerability that's discovered, maybe some kind of underlying component or operating system that needs to be upgraded. As a center of excellence, you might understand which teams are impacted and vulnerable, but you can't just fix it on their behalf. You'll generally have to put something in their backlog and be reliant on them to change it. So you as a platform team can't actually kind of change that. And finally, we have the measurement aspect. And enterprises are generally somewhere between level 1 and 2 here as well. And there's generally some kind of measurement involved, but it usually involves basic technical ones. User and satisfaction metrics are often gathered in a custom and an ad hoc manner, which is not repeatable. So it's not very consistent at this stage. So as we said, all right, we've now plotted, we've plotted and we know where we are starting from and where we need to go. So now what we want to do is plan and do our small impactful iterations and find out, what should we tackle first. Now, in our experience, the next few steps can be crucial as you really want to lay a solid foundation for building the right thing and not just anything. So we found that improvements in a few key sort of aspects can really lay the foundation for making more significant changes later. And the first one that's quite key is, as I said before, is investment. So if you're going to be scaling to 20 plus teams, you're going to need more funding. That kind of goes without saying. But more importantly, you need to change the mindset and the approach. Now, when moving from like level 2 to level 3, this is really where you move towards more of a customer-centric and a platform as a product approach rather than the more traditional project-based one. So practically, what does this mean? Generally means that if you don't already have C-level buy-in, you generally will need that, and it generally doesn't work without that. You're also going to need to recognize that you need to start bringing in new types of roles into your platform team. So it's not just going to be the technical folk anymore, but also product managers, evangelists to be able to help you with some of these broader initiatives. And these extra folk are going to help lay some of these foundational aspects for us as we go along. So once we've moved that dial, we then want to move on to the measurements. Make sure that we go from having ad hoc measurements to at least having reliable intel. Now, this move will often involve tapping into some of those newfound skills that we may just have brought on board, product managers and things like that, to help design qualitative surveys, understand what the user sentiment is, and not just for this to be a one-off exercise, but actually establish a more regular cadence to help work out if we're progressing or not. So that's on the measurement side of things. On the operational side, we want to continue setting the foundations. And here we want to move towards having a clearer view of the roles and responsibilities. What I'm talking about here is really just around documentation and the sort of discoverability of the platform capabilities. So at a minimum, we want to get to a point where, even if it's manual to begin with, to understand who owns what and who's responsible for what, so we can understand how to move forward. So let's say, for example, you're offering a database as a service sort of offering. You want to have like a central catalog to understand who owns the database, who's responsible for it. You might even uncover as part of this, there's a bit of a hybrid scenario going on where the platform team is taking full responsibility for some teams, maybe newer ones that have come on, but there's some gnarly ones that have been around for a while and they're still kind of doing their own things. But at least understanding what these are and what the estate looks like means that you'll be able to understand how you move forward more effectively and efficiently. Now, everything I've said thus far doesn't necessarily cover a lot of the technical things. But when we go into a customer, we will almost always conduct some kind of technical due diligence and an assessment as part of this. And this is something that is definitely needs to be done. So bear in mind, this framework didn't exist until November 2023. So our process involves a mixture of and a blending of the sort of technical as well as the more business aspects here. Now, it sounds obvious, but obviously you can't get away with just doing this high-level stuff. You need to make sure that you have the right technical capability and people who have done this before to really help assess some of the technical and business trade-offs involved. So a good example here is when you're looking at a multi-tenancy, the multi-tenancy options to scale. So here I show like 3 different models which could be used. And these all come with very different cost profiles, risk, security, and isolation considerations, as well as operational overheads. Now, technical choice made here can have a really large impact and ramification on the size and the complexity of the estate that you ultimately need to manage in the end. So it's not a decision that you want to be taken in isolation. And combining both the technical as well as the business, and policy decisions is crucial to getting this right and to getting your platform to a maturity level which aligns with all of your organization. Now, you'll generally find that as you move along, you make great progress in all of the areas except for one where you'll find a bit of a sticking point. And this is generally going to be around adoption. And this is because you can't just move this forward yourself. You generally have to make improvements in many of the other areas in parallel to actually get people to want to adopt and use the platform more. Now, generally, as I mentioned earlier, enterprises will often mandate platform use. But even so, you still find people struggling to use it or indeed actually try and work around it. Now, there can be a lot of sort of challenges that are involved in this, and a few that we've seen that really kind of cause a drag on adoption, I'm just going to go through here. So even technically, you may manage to tick many of the boxes that we've spoken about. But if there is a lack of confidence in the teams themselves, this can be problematic. So this may be because nobody else is in production yet and they don't want to be the first to go there. It could be that there's unproven day 2 credentials and they're just not confident that this is going to be able to support what they need. There may even be often that we've seen sort of insufficient features and offerings. But more often than not, an insufficient amount of developer relations has taken place. And this is something that we have found is really crucial to get right. And in multiple different clients, what we found is that if you don't have some dedicated people who are there to really help explain and proactively help onboard and bring people onto the platform, often in the form of enablement types teams of the sort of team topologies lingo, this can really hold your adoption back. Also, one of the things that we found is that you don't try and onboard, if you're trying to scale up to 20 teams, all 20 at the same time. Rather, you want to take 1 or 2 teams that are the trailblazers, that have bought in and are willing to go through you, like go all the way through to production with you, because they will help you with the feedback and give you the feedback on the pain that they're experiencing and make sure that you can then iterate and go forward off the back of that. So small baby steps is definitely the way to go here, rather than just getting everybody to one stage and then trying to improve from there. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the scaling of an enterprise center of excellence. And remember, there will often be little steps of adjustment that you need to make in order to move forward. So back to our scenarios. As I said, we've looked at 2, and there could be more, but time is against us. So we're just going to go to finish off with the key lessons and the conclusion. So I would say, as part of your strategy for moving towards a more mature platform, what you really want to do is make sure that you start off by identifying your ultimate goals and the constraints that you're working with. When you know that, you also then want to know what your landscape is. So where are you currently and where are you starting from? And from there, you can plan and take baby steps and iterate towards where you want to get to. As noted, there are certain things that you can do to help lay the foundation for building the right thing and not just anything. So look at things like the investment, operations, and the measurement side of things. And also don't forget that you definitely need to do technical due diligence in understanding how to incorporate the technology, the people, business, and process thinking all at the same time. So, in conclusion, I would say that in addition to those key lessons and takeaways that I've just noted, it's good to know that the maturity model can be a helpful part of your plan, but it is not the plan. You still need to work out what the strategies are to help you move from point A to point B, and recognize that, as you're trying to mature with these ever increasing sort of levels, there is going to be a requirement for more time and money. And because every organization is unique, you don't need a one size fits all and automatically aim everything for level 4. You want to really kind of tailor it for your context and what you are genuinely able to achieve. So, whatever your strategy is and the approach, make sure that you try and balance the people, the process, and the policy alongside your technology for an optimal outcome. And hopefully, with some of these insights and tips, you will be armed with the approaches and the tools to help you embark on your platform engineering maturity initiative. Thank you.